In our previous video, we learned what the groups of buttons are. In this video, we're going to learn what actions we can take with them. We perform actions by committing button presses, and there are different kinds of presses. You can press a single button or a combination of buttons. In real life, a workflow is a chain of combinations and single button presses. So these actions can be on the machine itself, like turning it off, or on the operating system, like looking for a file, or we can do something to that file. And we do this by changing the state of our computer, so something like muting the volume or turning off the internet connection, or we can do something to affect the memory, like creating data or updating data. Let's go ahead and take a look at the lessons. The first thing that we're going to cover is editing data, and after that we're going to take a look at some of the different commands that we can do. And our task for part one is to build a document. And whenever we have a task, our plan is to break down that task into smaller steps. So a document is a group of paragraphs, and that's a group of sentences, which is a group of words, and that's just a group of characters. And we know how to make characters, so we must know how to make a document. Let's go ahead and jump into these steps. What we're going to do is open a program, save a file, and then we're going to do some typing. I'm going to show you the most basic example, which is starting from the Windows desktop. We're going to open the Start menu. We're going to find the program that we want to open, and then open it. So here's my desktop, and I'm going to get to my taskbar down here. I'm going to click on Start, and I have this icon right here. That's a shortcut, and it happens to be the program that I want. But let's say that I didn't have that. What I'm going to do instead is type Notepad, and I'm going to click on it, and that's how we open the program. So that was step one. We started off at the desktop. We opened the Start menu, we found the program that we wanted, and then we opened it. The next thing that we're going to do is save a new blank file. So notice that the name of our file is called Untitled. And the first time that we save a file, that's a save as. And that's how we give it a name. After we have a name, then we can do a regular save. So the way to start a save is to click on File and then select Save As in this case. And that's going to open up the Save As dialog box. Up here we have the location of where we're going to save it. So there's a difference between saving something like in your documents versus saving something on your desktop. And when we give it a file name, we can call it almost anything. There are rules for file names, and basically don't use any punctuation. You should avoid using spaces, but it is okay to use a dash, underscore, or the period. So let's call this almost anything.txt. And now instead of untitled, the name of this file is almost anything. And that was step two. Now that we have a file and we're successfully doing nothing with it, we're ready to do some typing. So what we're going to take a look at are single letters and spaces. We're also going to talk about the cursor and how we can move it around. Then we're going to take a look at capital letters and how to get to the next line and indent the paragraph. We're also going to take a look at numbers and punctuation, and we're going to go over how to erase characters. We're also going to talk about selection and how to move around in our document. So the letters are located in the primary group right in the middle. And when we press one of those buttons, we get lowercase letters. So when we're done typing a word and we're ready to get to the next word, we need to type a single space, and we do that with spacebar. So that's how we can get to the next word. So that was letters and spaces, and now we're ready to talk about the cursor. The cursor is this blinking line right here, and I can use the mouse to move the cursor. Sometimes we refer to them as the mouse cursor and the text cursor. The cursor is important because that is where we're going to type, and we can move the cursor around two ways. The first one is what we're seeing here by using the mouse, and we're just performing a click. The other way to move the cursor is to use the direction buttons. So for example, we can move the cursor to the left just by pressing the left arrow button, and the same thing for right. And if we had more lines, we will in just a second, but we could also move the cursor up and down. So to get to a capital letter, we have to use a modifier key, and the one that we use is called Shift. This is just the location of where the two Shift keys are. When you use Shift, you only need to use one of these. So for example, if we wanted to write a capital letter P, then what we would do is hold down Shift, strike the P key, and then let go of Shift. So something just like this. Hold down Shift, hit P, and then let go of Shift. And that's how we get capital letters. If we wanted to only write capital letters, then what we can do is lock our computer to capitals, and the button for that is called Caps Lock. When you press Caps Lock, it makes your computer normally type in capitals, and if we were to hold Shift and then press a letter, it goes back to typing in lowercase. And we can turn that off just by pressing Caps Lock again. So when we're done writing a sentence, maybe the last sentence of a paragraph, we're going to want to get to the next line. And we do that using the Enter button. And sometimes this is called Return. So what that does is it puts our cursor on the next line. And we can just have as many new lines as we want. When we are actually ready to write a paragraph, we're going to perform an indentation, and the button for that is Tab. When you press Tab, it puts your cursor out here as opposed to right at the beginning. So in particular, the tab is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces. So you can see how it lines up like that. So speaking of the numbers, the way that we get to the numbers is by just typing them. The way I typed 8 was I just pressed the number 8. So same thing, you can just press the numbers and they'll happen. If you look carefully, you'll see that there's punctuation marks above the numbers. There's also punctuation marks all around that. So the way that our keyboard normally types in lowercase, our keyboard normally types what's at the bottom of any of the buttons that have 2 rows of characters. When we press Shift, that's how we get the characters that are up on top. So for example, let's take a look at the brackets, these 2 buttons right here. If I just press those buttons, I get the square brackets. But if I hold down Shift and I press those 2 buttons, then I get the curly braces. So as we're working along, 100% guarantee you will make a mistake on the keyboard. And that's fine because it's not like a real physical piece of paper where you gotta do work to fix your mistake. Instead, you can just erase your mistakes. And there are two ways to do erasing. The first one is to use the backspace. And that will literally go back one space. And if you just keep pressing that button, it just keeps erasing. In particular, it erases one character back. There's another button called delete. And that's like erasing, except it erases one character in front of the cursor. So for selection, the reason we have selection is because it can become tedious if you only edited one letter at a time. We don't have to do that. We can select a whole word. So there's two ways to make a selection. One is to use the mouse, the other one is to use the keyboard. So the way that we move the cursor with a single click with the mouse, we can do a selection with the mouse by performing a double click, and that will select a whole word. It also gets the space at the end of the word. And you can just select any word that you want. All you have to do is double click on it. So the other way to do a selection is a little bit more controlled. We're going to use the Shift key and one of the direction buttons. So what that looks like, we'll hold down Shift and let's go left. It'll make a selection one character at a time. And you can be more specific like that than you can by just double clicking on the whole word. So why would we want to do this? Well, the way that we can edit just a single character, we can just edit a whole word. And that's going to lead us into our next topic. There's a button on the keyboard called Insert, and it has a very specific purpose. Normally, when you're typing something, the letters will appear where the cursor is. And in particular, we started typing behind the N of normally, and the computer kept the word normally, and it showed us what we were typing. If you press the insert button, my cursor is going to disappear, but if I press the right button, it'll come back. And we'll see that I have just one character selected. So let's go back to the start of the word insert. If I started typing, it's going to write over what's already there. So sorry, let me do that again for you. Normally, but we're using insert. So what's going to happen is each letter is going to change. So that's what insert does. Okay, and moving around. So to move around, we can use the direction buttons, or we can use the home and page up and page down key. If I'm at the end of the line and I want to go to the beginning of the line, I can just click on the beginning of the line. Or I can use the home key, and the home key is going to make my cursor jump to the beginning of the line. And same thing for end, except it's going to make the cursor jump to the end of the line. If I had a lot of text, I could use the page up and page down keys. Let me just give you something to look at here. So if we're up at the top and I press page down, it's going to scroll the page down. And if I press page up, it'll scroll the page up. So that was moving around, and that actually was the 3 steps for our lesson 1. Let's go ahead and take a look at lesson 2.